Round one. Fight. Higher. Higher.
Hey guys, and welcome back to yet another episode. On today's show, we are going to be taking a look at World Heroes 2, but not the Neo Geo version that most people are familiar with. No, we're looking at the Super Nintendo/Super Famicom port, which was put out a year later in 1994 by Takara. World Heroes 2 is my personal favorite of the World Heroes saga on the Neo Geo, so I was a little disappointed with the adaptations of the first game on the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis. Not to say that they're bad per se, but they just didn't feel the same way that the Neo Geo versions did back when those came out. Fortunately, that's not the case here, and I'm happy to say that the Super Famicom/Super Nintendo version of World Heroes 2 truly does retain the feel of the arcade game. You know, it could just be that maybe it took Takara a few years to get comfortable with porting Neo Geo games over, because when they first started doing it, even with World Heroes 1, Art of Fighting 1, and especially Fatal Fury 1, the games just seemed like they were on the right track, but just not quite there. By the time they started porting World Heroes 2, Art of Fighting 2, and of course Fatal Fury 2 and Special, it seemed like they had a lot better idea of how to make them feel the right way once they ported them down to different hardware. But before we get carried away, let's not give Takara too much credit, since they really didn't do the heavy lifting on this particular title. This one was developed and published in Japan by Saurus, who was very familiar with the Neo Geo hardware and actually developed games specifically for the MVS and AES. The thing is, Takara published it here in the West. The Super Nintendo version of World Heroes 2 retains all of the characters from the arcade version and is the only version of the game where you can select the boss characters via a special code in the Versus mode. In addition to the regular arcade mode, Deathmatch also makes its appearance here, with a whole different set of stages, all equipped with all sorts of dangerous environmental hazards.
Fight.
So when you're talking about the graphics, obviously there are going to be some cuts that have to be made, since this is of course a Neo Geo port, but unlike some of the earlier ports, this one still looks really good. If you put it right up next to the Neo Geo game, you're obviously going to see the differences, but when you play this on a Super Nintendo, everything looks really excellent. The stages are all nicely represented and the character sprites are large and animate well, although it's obviously a few frames shy of the Neo Geo original. The sound and music is pretty great in this one too, but that's not to say that there's not any misses here. Problem is, this is a Super Nintendo game, so it does suffer from that same problem that so many other games on the system do, where the sound sounds very echoey and kind of like it's coming from inside of a tin can. Even still, the music is really, really good here, and I am a big fan of some of the Super Nintendo renditions of some of the arcade tracks. The controls work really well too, obviously, since I feel like Super Nintendo controllers are really built for Neo Geo ports. With the 4 buttons on the face, it's very, very comfortable playing Neo Geo games, since they're all based around 4-button setups anyway. If you're a fan of the series or just World Heroes 2 in particular, it's pretty hard not to be impressed by the Super Nintendo/Super Famicom version. You can tell that whoever it was that ported this really seemed to enjoy the game they were porting and made sure to really get in all of the details that made it feel the way that it did originally when it was in the arcade. World Heroes 2 on the Super Nintendo is hardly a rare game, and it's not going to cost you an arm and a leg to pick up in either region should you decide to go the import route. It's going to run you about $5 to $10 on average, but you got to watch out for your shipping costs as per usual when importing stuff. The US version runs a little bit more, usually fetching around $15 to $20 for a decent copy of it, but either way you go, it's worth the money. This is a great version of World Heroes 2 if you lack the means to play the Neo Geo original. All in all, it's right up there with some of the best ports of Neo Geo games on the Super Nintendo. I would put it right alongside Art of Fighting 2 and Fatal Fury 2 as one of the absolute best ones on the system. As always, guys, I'd like to thank you all for watching, subscribing, and of course commenting. And until next time, stay classic.